This is Sigurdson of WeAreChange.org, and in this specific video, we are joined by G. Edward Griffin, the amazing author and researcher of Creature from Jekyll Island, and of course, World Alternative Media with Josh Sigurdson and his better half. But in this video, we're not only going to be talking to them about the very important aspect of the national debt just increasing to $22 trillion, a major milestone, but to the bigger theater at hand that's happening between Donald Trump, the Federal Reserve, and even the president warning that the Federal Reserve is a bigger threat than China. But first of all, $22 trillion, what is your guys' reaction to this milestone that is just so ridiculous? $22 trillion. What's your take on it, G. Edward?
Okay, I think the key to my take on that is when you said theater a moment ago. It's all theater. It's been all theater for a long, long time. Yeah, $22 trillion is ridiculous. So is $21 trillion, and so is $19 trillion, and so is $10 trillion, and so forth. It's all ridiculous, and it's been ridiculous for a long, long time. The fact of the matter is that all this business about worried about the debt, let's limit the debt, is theater, because they know that it long ago had passed the point where it could ever be repaid. They know it's just a question of who's going to get stuck with the bill. And so that's the theater that we're playing through, and I get kind of fed up looking at these newspaper accounts where the journalists are playing it at its face value. You know, well, what are we going to do about this problem? As though there was anything that's going to be done about the problem except to let it get worse until the whole thing collapses, and then we got a bigger problem to worry about. And then all the guys that stole the money or caused it to be lost are probably over in Costa Rica someplace, and we're stuck with the bill.
Yeah, or Chile and Argentina, that's where some of the Bushes have moved down to as well. That's also a key important aspect of it. But, like, it's comical. I mean, guys, it's really comical. $22 trillion, the vast amount of that. What's your reactions and any addition you guys want to add to that?
Well, you know, 22 trillion is just going to keep on going up to, you know, 30, 40, 50, 80, 100 trillion. It doesn't really matter. What it is just a number of, the government, it can print as much money as they want and force you to use it. And what I've seen throughout history is all these different empires, they live and die with their currency. So they could print until the currency becomes so worthless at one point where people's like, no, I can't afford food anymore. Like, look at you been in France, in the Gilets jaunes, the Yellow Vest movement. That is the symptom of the Yellow Vest movement is the symptom of, like, all this debt that gets created, all this money that constantly gets printed out into the economy. And at one point, it's just going to be that breaking point where it just snaps, where you have, like, the Arab Spring, for example, where just people can't afford anymore food or you know, the general necessities, and that's when, like, the whole system is just going to crumble down. That's my point of view.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the bigger kind of general effects of it with just the prices of basic necessities going up everywhere. Meanwhile, the whole system's rigged. The government just keeps borrowing more money just blatantly and financing just the most ridiculous, craziest projects. I mean, we're awake to this. A lot of people aren't awake to this. But what are some of the bigger lessons? What are some of the kind of your take on this, Josh?
Well, I think one of the bigger lessons is that, of course, when everyone's in debt, everyone's in servitude, and we know who they're in servitude to. The people that print the money, the banks, the governments, and I think that's one of the main takes away from this is what are we doing to break free from that system? What are we doing to protect ourselves? Of course, there's many different ways to protect ourselves, lots of solutions. I like what Ed just said there, that he's fed up with this system. I think that no pun intended, of course, but I think that there was a bit of a pun there. Because honestly, once people realize that the Federal Reserve System is pushing them into servitude, they're losing their purchasing power every day they go to work. It's a hidden tax. They are losing money off their paychecks. I think it's absolutely disgusting. But I do see a lot of solutions out of that, and those solutions also include assets, you know, cash flow, gold and silver, in my opinion. You know, obviously throughout history we've seen that, and of course to a great degree, certain decentralized cryptocurrencies for the time being. Not saying especially what is going to happen down the line with that, but for the time being, I mean, competing currency systems are great, and we got to get out of the legal tender system and stop being a debt slave. Because, of course, if they shove you down that bottomless pit of debt, you are forced to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, which puts you in perfect servitude right where they want you. So that's the main lesson I take out of it.
Yeah, I mean, G. Edward Griffin, I still want to emphasize the incredible work that you've been doing for decades, warning people, hey, the banking system's pretty corrupt. The private quasi-public banking system, they're not doing what they say they're doing. And now we're finally in a position, $22 trillion. will it ever pop? Will it ever kind of face its kind of reckoning? Because we're seeing things happening in Venezuela, and we saw things happen in Zimbabwe, but is this system just bulletproof with the United States spending so much money? And I kind of just see this continuing on for, I don't know how long, but could this go on forever? What do you guys think?
Well, I don't think it can go on forever, but I admit that it has gone on a lot longer than I thought it would without the bubble bursting. But I think we're seeing a phenomenon that's kind of the first time in history, and that is the globalization of the monetary system. We talk about making a one world currency, but actually we've almost already gotten there when we consider that the U.S. dollar is the primary dollar of exchange around the world. All the major financial transactions are either done in dollars or they can be converted to dollars very quickly, and the accounts are settled in dollars. So that gives the people in the United States a unique opportunity, an opportunity to kind of swindle the rest of the world, because we create the dollars. It doesn't cost very much to make a dollar. In fact, you don't even have to print it anymore. It just shows up in a computer digit of some kind. So we can make dollars pretty easily, and we can go through the payroll, or not the payroll, but the accounting procedure of having assets and offset by liabilities, and we go through all those tricks, and it sounds very good, but the bottom line is we just created money out of nothing, and we created out of debt, which is worse than nothing, and so we were able to do this at the expense of the rest of the world, because they were hungry for our dollars, because they were exchangeable for their currencies and for goods and services. Well, that era is coming to an end. I don't know how fast it's going to come to an end, but I feel the speed up already, and I don't know how long it can continue. But back to your main point, I do not think it can go on forever. But the difference is, in my view, that it might not end the same way it has always ended before. It has always ended before as a complete collapse, as John had just said here. I mean, nations fall because of this, and peoples uprise because of this, and governments are overthrown because of this. But there's something else going on here. Since this is global in nature, now they're beginning to talk about switching to an international monetary system, a single currency, which means a single authority of governance. The whole thing comes together where there is no escape. You cannot walk out on this. You cannot abandon it, because there are no escape doors anymore. There are no doors. They're all in. There are none out. And so what they're talking about, new currencies, and now they're talking about digital currencies and cryptocurrencies, and the governments and the central banks are drooling over this, because that's going to be an end to cash. An end to cash now changes. It's a game changer. If you cannot take your money out of the system, if you're by law and by physical impossibility, you have to leave your monetary wealth in the system, because there's no way to take it out. It's all crypto. Well, then they finally got you. That's a final gotcha. It never happened before in history. Now you're if we allow this to happen, there are no doors out, of course, and there's no way for us to apparently to escape from it in any way.
And people need to realize this is more of a possibility than you think. I remember, 2 years ago, I landed in India. And when I landed in India, they had a currency reset where they literally made two of the most popular notes illegal. So people would have to go in and make sure that they declare their income, how much money, how much cash they had, so they could pay taxes on it. So this is a kind of bigger scheme here that states do. And of course, you bring up the international aspect of it, which is also very, very important. As we know, China and Russia also are a big component of this. Josh and World Alternative Media and John have been talking about this also in great detail on their channel. But the last kind of comment that I wanted to bring with you guys, just to kind of finish this off and kind of have a general discussion, is with Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump, just a few weeks ago, even said that the Federal Reserve is more of a threat than China. What's your kind of assessment and take? Is he a part of the game? Is he a part of the scheme? Is he playing along? They're having disputes about the budget, but in reality, we're $22 trillion in debt. It doesn't really matter. It's, again, just more theater. But how do you guys assess it? Whoever wants to take it first goes.
Yeah, well, I first want to mention that we're in an age of information that's very important. When you look at the history of the fiat system, for example, you look at 1,000 years of fiat currencies. Coming up on 1024 AD in China, I believe, was the first real functioning fiat currency. I might be a little bit off on that. But 1,000 years have gone by, but today we have this age of information. We have the internet. We have the access to We Are Change, to Ed Griffin's work, The Creature from Jekyll Island. We have access to Wham. And I think this is really important because no matter what Trump does, obviously presidents don't have a say over this. They can make little adjustments. But, I mean, honestly, how many times do we have to explain if a president goes and says, I'm going to end the Fed and just shuts down, he's going to get a bullet in his head. I'm not that optimistic that a president can change all of this. I think this is going to be more on the people and innovation on the market to replace that system. And obviously Donald Trump talking about the Fed and how it's a danger and saying that it's more of a risk than China. Well, I find that interesting because if you consider the fact that China is being pushed to become the new world reserve currency, and that's really what the international community seems to be heading towards, then it doesn't matter whether it's China or the Federal Reserve. Yeah, countries are swapping out of the US dollar, and what, are they going to move to China? Are they going to move to the yuan? I think it's complete nonsense. We have to look to ourselves, decentralize, compete currencies, and stop depending on people to manipulate money and make money for us, because it's nonsense, it's never worked, and historically it's enslaved millions upon millions of people.
Excellent point.
Yeah, no, when it comes to this whole system with having a central bank, we just got to learn, like, where are we heading towards with the United States and with what Trump is saying, the Fed is the enemy. Well, look at what Bank of Japan has done, because that's where we're going. Like, Bank of Japan owns 86.11% of all the ETFs. They've bought stocks, they bought real estate. And if you go back to the speech of Ben Bernanke in 2002, when it was put in as a governor, not the chair at the time, but as the governor, he said that, you know, we need to look at what kind of menus of assets that we need to buy to prop up the economy. And he said, you know, the printing press will never fail. If we get deflation, we will print enough to conquer the deflation with inflation. Because if you get deflation in the economy, that's the mortal enemy of the Keynesian debt-based system, where you always got to get more debt to pay off that ever-increasing interest that doesn't exist. You will have a complete collapse, and that's what they're just gonna. I believe they're just gonna keep on printing, and I believe, like, Donald Trump has like zero to nothing to say about that. Like, it's all set up as a separate entity, the Federal Reserve, and all of its underlying, you know, like the exchange stabilization fund that it has, you know, hiding around in the world. I believe they're like a huge part of this whole thing, trying to, you know, use their counterparties, probably not with the offices they have around the world, to, like, oh, here's a hedge fund over in China, they could buy some assets, just make it seem like the Fed is all okay, but then you have these guys over here, you know, actually manipulating. So, like, right now you're seeing, like, the Fed is kind of selling off assets, but meanwhile, the other, you know, Bank of England, Bank of Japan, and the other big ones, they're actually loading up there. So actually, I did roll the numbers on all the central banks. They actually have increased the balance sheet globally 3%. So it's like, it's not going down. Like, they're actually buying more and more assets, because it's a Ponzi scheme. You can't taper a Ponzi scheme, as a guy said. I forgot his name. And that's what this is. It's a massive global Ponzi scheme that's run by a whole bunch of criminal banksters that, you know, get paid dividends on their investment in the Federal Reserve. And you're not going to have, you know, Donald Trump. He could say everything that he wants, you know, with the best of intentions, but you're not going to stop this entity that's separate from the government, in my point of view.
Very great, excellent points. And last comments, Edward Griffin?
Well, yeah, I'm trying to stay focused on the original question, because there's so many interesting items that these gentlemen have brought up here. But back to the main point, Donald Trump and his fear of the Federal Reserve. I am reminded of the biblical quotation, by their fruits ye shall know them. Another way of saying it is, actions speak louder than words. And I've begun to think a lot about those phrases lately, because from the day that Mr. Trump was elected, and we all, many of us at least, had so much hope that he was actually going to do something in these areas, we were left with the words but not the actions. And issue after issue, we've seen the words come out, oh, finally something is going to happen. We're going to build a wall, or whatever it is, you know, or we're going to solve this problem or that problem. And of course, one of those that he's always spoken very suspiciously about the Federal Reserve, but he's never done anything about it, which now, in his defense, there's not much that he can do about it, because Congress has passed into law the Federal Reserve Act, which is a cartel agreement that was legalized by Congress, in which it says that the president really can do nothing about it except appoint the chairman of the board and that kind of thing. But he has no control over it, and the Congress has no control over it. That's what Congress agreed to give away, its power over the monetary system in this stupid thing called the Federal Reserve Act. So the president can't do anything about it. But I noticed that he has appointed to his cabinet some people who are very friendly to the Federal Reserve, and he has appointed to his cabinet people who are kind of what we call the war hawks. He says, well, we got to put an end to all these foreign wars, but then he increases the military budget and does just the opposite. So I'm back to this thing that, actions speak louder than words. And so that's my present level of skepticism at the moment. Let us see what happens.
I think you're 100% right with that. More skepticism, especially in today's media day and age, the better you are off. And again, $22 trillion just hit today. In the comment section below, let me know if you think it's going to hit 30, 40, 50 trillion. Where do you think the reality is finally going to set in on this larger financial economic theater that we're all going through? And personally, I want to thank G. Edward Griffin and World Alternative Media. Their links, of course, will be in the description below. Really awesome crew. We're here at Anarchapulco. Expect a lot more coverage with important topics that you won't hear about on the mainstream media. So if you found this video helpful, share it with your friends and family members. And once again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of real independent media. Thank you again so much for watching. Stay tuned for more here on youtube.com/we are change.